So, welcome everybody. This is another edition of AskTOM Office Hours for Database and Memory. We have Maria Colgan, our host, I guess, or moderator, and then myself. My name's Andy Rivenis. We're both product managers with Oracle, and I thought today would be interesting to talk about the InMemory Advisor. And so, with that, I guess we'll go ahead and get started. So our safe harbor statement, although I don't think I'll mention anything new. So I was going to just real quick, I do want to keep this relatively brief. Oh, and don't let me forget, if you have any questions, please, yeah, again, as Maria said, type them in. And if it's just regular in-memory questions as well, because certainly we can answer any questions outside of the focus on the in-memory advisor. So don't hesitate to, if you have anything. We don't want you to leave with questions unanswered. Even if you can stump us, we'll still find the answer for you. So, but what I wanted to do kind of quickly was just review database and memory, because it leads into the topic of why we have an in-memory advisor. And just as a quick review for folks that may not be as familiar with database and memory, it's really targeted at analytics. And we allocate a new area in the SGA in memory to populate data in columnar format, and that columnar format provides a very fast way to access lots of data. And so the buffer cache and the traditional Oracle row store, the Oracle database architecture hasn't changed. We've just added the ability to populate objects in a columnar format, and we have some special sauce underneath the covers that makes that very fast to scan, filter, join, and aggregate data. And the kind of the magic of all of that is not just in memory in the columnar format, but that the optimizer will parse and decide whether to access that data in the row store or the column store, so that no code has to change. And that's a real biggie. So, but, well, actually, let me go to the next one. So it's very simple to set up. In-memory underscore size allocates the memory. But one of the things I wanted to highlight is number 2 is we don't populate the entire database or maybe even an entire schema. Or you can do it by schema if you want. You can put all the objects in the column store. But kind of the advantage of database and memory is that you get to pick and choose the objects that you want to populate into this in-memory columnar format in the column store, which is going to lead us into why the in-memory advisor can be valuable to help with that. Because naturally, people will ask, well, so how much memory do I need, and what objects do I populate? And that's kind of the topic for today, is the in-memory advisor, to help you figure that out. So let me just finish up with that with highlighting that since the column store isn't a cache, the amount of memory you decide to allocate to the column store in the database becomes important, because it's going to be fixed in size, unlike the buffer cache, which is a cache. So I usually say a lot of our Oracle customers tend to run pretty memory stingy or small, poor, because they usually don't have to have a large buffer cache or a lot of memory to run Oracle database. It's so efficient in the row store at caching just database blocks that are active that you haven't had to have large memory footprints. However, with database and memory, now we're telling you we're going to populate entire objects in the column store. And yes, we do compression and we have some other optimizations, but the bottom line is that you need to allocate memory to be able to populate those objects. That's the in-memory part of database and memory. And so notice I have here the in-memory area is really large in comparison with the rest of the SGA. And I tend to tell folks that don't steal memory from other existing portions of the SGA, like maybe the buffer cache or the shared pool, because then your existing workload's likely to suffer. And so this idea of having to add additional memory, the in-memory part of database and memory, to support objects that you get to pick and choose, leads us into the in-memory advisor. And that just, I threw this slide in there just to highlight the being able to choose tables, partitions, subpartitions, and materialized views. So not that that's all that important in general, but actually the in-memory advisor will help you with this, because as we'll kind of cover in the final output of a run for the in-memory advisor, it'll actually give you the commands that you can just run to populate objects based on space, and we'll kind of get into those details. So with that, okay, now we're ready to talk about the in-memory advisor. So I had an extra slide in there, but that's because I was kind of going through this saying, how can I give everybody a little quick background to make sure that we're all on the same page? So how do you figure out what to populate? How do you figure out how much space you need? So we have a web page on oracle.com, and I actually, okay, so now I'm going to go back to, whoops. Okay, get this right in a minute. So I tried to highlight, there we go. So I'm going to flip out of this real quick because I have this slide. We'll make, these slides will be in the video, so I have the URL here, but I also actually have the real slide. So, or the actual website, if I can figure out how to get to moving it over, because I've got all these windows in my way. There we go. So on oracle.com, if you search, all I did is Google search for Oracle In-Memory Advisor, you will find this page that describes the In-Memory Advisor. It's actually something you can download from, as it turns out, My Oracle Support. So in here we kind of talk about what it is. We point you to Database in Memory, our web page, if you aren't familiar with Database in Memory. But if you're looking for the In-Memory Advisor, chances are you might know something about Database in Memory. If not, that link will take you there. We describe a little bit about it, and then we point you to a MOS note, which I'll bring up in a second, that will allow you to download the In-Memory Advisor, and actually a couple other follow-on documents to help you with it. In addition to that, we have down here some examples, so a PDF file and a best practices. So there's actually some additional information here as well to give you kind of the launch or the start in to how to use data or the in-memory advisor. So with that, then if we were to click on this, and I'm actually not going to do that because I don't want to sign in, and I have it up already somewhere here. So right there, that's called being prepared. So what you wind up doing is if you click on that, you'll wind up in My Oracle Support. So you have to have an ID to get into support. Oh, mine says employees. I could have gone to the regular one. But you'll see this doc. And so what you get is out of this is a description of the in-memory advisor and then some links. And so we'll talk about this, but the gist of it is the in-memory advisor.zip file you can download. So you click on that, you download the zip file, and then I'll show you, you unzip it and you can install the in-memory advisor. In addition to that, we have, again, links to database in memory in case you need some background on database in memory. But one of the key ones, and I'll show you this, is the in-memory advisor white paper, technical white paper, and in there it gives you instructions on what to do with the files in the zip file. So it's actually pretty straightforward. This isn't really that hard. One of the other kind of cool things about this, and I don't know if it says it in here, I think yeah, right there, that this works on any Oracle database 11.203 or higher, Oracle Database Enterprise Edition database, 11.203 or higher. So if you haven't, for some reason, upgraded to 12 or 18C or 19C, that's okay, you should, but in the meantime, you can actually still run this. The only caveat to all of this, and I don't know if I have that, I may have that in one of my slides, because I've already gone through the MOS node, and I've gone through the downloads. I guess I don't, I usually do that in a regular, actually I do it right here. So is that since we're gonna access AWR and ASH data when we run the in-memory advisor, you do have to have the database tuning pack license available. So that's just an Oracle thing. In order to access AWR and ASH data, which again, I could say everybody should have access to that, but you know, just to be aware that it does require the licensing the database tuning pack, which requires the other, what is it, the diag pack.
Yeah, diag and tuning tend to go together, yeah.
Right. See, in order to do the tuning pack, you have to have the diag pack. So basically the diag and tuning pack, and actually this is, I'll come back to this, but this is essentially what I've already said, plus starting to look at what the output of the In-Memory Advisor is. And I kind of skim through these slides because I'm just doing it with the actual web pages. But I do go over here, and I'll leave this up for a second so that if you go back and review the video, you can see that. But kind of how this is all put together, being that you get the actual code, the white paper that describes how to use the In-Memory Advisor, and then some release notes that talk about there's some additional caveats, maybe depending on the environment you're in. So have that, and then I just tell you the instructions, and then I'm gonna walk you through a little bit of this. It takes a few more minutes than I wanted to dedicate to actually running it. So I ran it last night, and I'll show you what I did and how it worked. And so we'll go through that. And then ultimately, it's going to install this DBMS In-Memory Advisor package in your database. So that's one other thing to be aware of. So it is Oracle. It's all Oracle blessed, certified, but it is going to install a package. So if that's a problem in your environment, you need to be aware that it's going to do that, because then that gets called to actually access the AWR and ASH information to produce the In-Memory Advisor report. And we'll kind of go through how you do that. So with that, I think I'm going to leave it here. Was there anything else? And I talked about those already from the webpage, but I'll leave those up for a second as well, since those are URLs, which are in that oracle.com, this initial page's link. Sorry for flipping around.
No, so Andy,
Yeah.
you mentioned there that maybe I can't install that package on production. So based on everything you've said, is it safe to say that if I have a reasonable test or development environment, one where I've run a representative workload, so I do have AWR and ASH, that I could perhaps try it there, the advisor there?
Absolutely. And actually, it even gets better than that. We do have customers who will export their AWR. I don't know if they can, I guess I'm blanking on whether the ASH data can come along with it. The ASH data is used to resolve objects so that you know what objects the SQL statements and are referring to. But you can actually export that data from your production system and then go run, import it into another, say, test database and run it there as well. We do have customers that do that. So you actually can do both ways. So it's relatively flexible because, again, it's just AWR data. And I don't remember with the ASH data, but I'm pretty sure you can transfer the ASH data. I just don't, off the top of my head, remember how to do that.
Yeah, no, you're right. You can. And that's actually, I hadn't thought of that, but that's the actually better way to do it. Rather than trying to fake production, just take the production data and run it on a separate system.
Right. Well, and we kind of hope that customers have some kind of a QA environment where they are load testing, but it's not always practical. So yeah, if you really can't do that or can't replicate it, then certainly just extracting it, and I think that's actually what the process is called, that AWR, moving it to another system, and then you can run it there as well. So we try to be flexible, and we always give you choices, which is kind of a good thing and a bad thing with Oracle. So, but anyways, let me now move over. So we've talked about the MOS note, how to get all of that, and then the one thing I wanted to start with. So I have my virtual box there, but I'm looking for. I knew I was going to have too many windows. There we go. So this is actually the PDF that you would have downloaded off the MOS note. So I would recommend downloading the In-Memory Advisor zip, and definitely this TW, the technical white paper, TWP, for the In-Memory Advisor. And when you take a look at this PDF file, and I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that for now. It looks something like this. Matter of fact, it looks exactly like this. It is a little old, but it's still very relevant. But the cool thing about this is we talk about all of the parts of the In-Memory Advisor package, but we also tell you how to do the installation. And it's actually very simple. So let me go back to where I was. And it's as simple as unzipping the In-Memory Advisor zip file. I'm going to show you that in my Linux environment on a virtual box, but and then actually just running this script, which creates the package, and then we'll go through what you do to actually run it. Again, Oracle, lots of choices. table spaces to use for the in-memory advisor. But what I wanted to get down to is actually the running part of it. And then we even have something you can get started with really quick, or you can dive in to all the details and decide you want to do something different. So that's entirely up to you. So instructions of how to do it. And then what I actually did last night was, see if we can get over here. Sorry, I have a bar up above. It makes it hard for me to see. So I have several windows. If I get this right, what I did is I actually took and somewhere in here, I had some, I'd unzipped the InMemory zip file. I don't have the unzip command must be back a little ways, but basically it unloaded all of these files in here. Ignore these two, we'll talk about those in a minute. But this was the directory that I chose to put my in-memory advisor code into. And so what I did is after I did that, then if I don't mess this up for you guys, I actually did the install and I had it in the right place. It looks like maybe I had it in the right place. So I literally connected, there we go, SQL Plus as sysdba. They talk about this is fully supported in multi-tenant. You can install it in a CDB or you can install it in individual PDBs. There's all sorts of environments. I have a 19.5 environment. This particular one, although I guess I won't be able to do that soon, is just a standard database, no multi-tenant. And so I'm going to install it as sysdba because it has all the privileges I need. And literally just running that script. That's a SQL script that's in this directory here. So I'm going to run that script, and it took probably in my machine like 3 or 4 minutes. I didn't want to, I said last night, I don't really want to wait, have you guys have to wait. So we'll just scroll through what it did basically. And so it gives you some information. It asks you what you want for table space. So for the permanent table space, I just chose system, which was the default. For the temporary table space, temp, which is again the default. And then it went through and told me I didn't have any errors, which is always a nice thing. And it went through and did its thing. All done. In-memory advisor installation successful. Yay, happy path. Tells us we have our package, the DMS in-memory advisor package. And if you're not going to run it as essentially like a DBA privilege user, it tells you there's an advisor privilege you can grant to whoever's going to run it so that they can access everything. And it even tells you how to uninstall it if you want to. So you can uninstall it as well. So that's actually all there is to it. Again, the only takeaway here, well, other than the instructions which are in the white paper, is that it is going to install something in your database. So be forewarned that if you have an environment where that's not allowed, don't do it. Put it somewhere else. So, and there are folks, our customers, that are very tight restrictions on that. So just be aware. And then what I did is I said, well, okay, so let's try running this thing. So I logged in. This is just my SSB schema that I use for hands-on labs. And I ran just the canned InMemory recommendations script. So I didn't go through and try to get fancy. The gist of this is that it's going to create an HTML report, and I'll show you portions of one since I don't have all of the ones I've got. As it turns out, I was telling Maria yesterday, are customer reports, and I can't very well show you customer data. So the SQL statements, which are no big deal, but names, I'm trying to be sensitive about that. So I can't show you those things, but I'll show you the kind of the gist of what it's going to produce, which is all you really care about, since your environment's obviously going to be different than anybody else's. But what we're going to do is we're going to run this script, and the key aspect of it is we're going to tell it a time period. And so what you want to do is you want to choose a time period where you have analytic activity. Now, maybe you don't know, so maybe this is an iterative process to go through, and maybe you do a very long period where you see, oh, we have activity, or maybe you know your work shifts and you can do it it's based on time, but basically AWR snapshots. So AWR by default will snapshot every hour unless you've changed that, which is entirely possible. So you want to choose a time period where you know you've had analytic activity so that we can pick up that activity and see, well, how much activity was there? How much memory do we think we would need to populate objects that the SQL statements are accessing? All of those questions that we're trying to answer.
So, Andy, is it true to say the bigger the time range I give it, perhaps the longer it may take to run?
Yeah,
Are you
but
a little aware of that?
yeah, I think it, but I don't think it's like any other. It's similar to a regular AWR report in that I don't, unless you have a huge amount of data collection, I don't think it's going to take super long. But to be honest, I don't usually get to run these. Our customers typically run them for me. So I don't think we're not talking hours, but we are talking, minutes to go through that. And obviously, I think the longer the time period, the longer it will run. But I've never heard anybody say that it ran, particularly long. I don't know if you've had people make that comment or not.
No, actually, not particularly. But I was just curious myself when you were saying that, because for a lot of us, we may not know on every database, exactly when the workloads occur. And so, to be honest, being the nervous Nelly I am, I would have just said, how much history do I have? Okay, InMemory Advisor, look at all of my, the history of AWR I have. By default, it's only 7 days, but, maybe I've extended that to 30 days. And I was just curious if you thought, well, the longer I do it, the more accurate it's probably going to be because it'll have that history. But I was just curious if it would delay how long it would take to run.
Yeah, my concern, and actually that's actually a pretty good question. I'll have to talk to. It's funny, we're not actually the PMs for the InMemory Advisor itself, but we are the beneficiaries of the InMemory Advisor. But I think my concern, and typically I usually tell folks that if the time period's too long, then you're likely to get a mishmash of more objects than perhaps are key to your true business periods. Because remember, you can change the makeup of the column store. You can, maybe you have a daytime processing where you have one set of objects and either use an ADO or soon, you can use AIM in 19C, 18C, 19C, but or maybe you have a scheduler task that might reconfigure the column store based on different workload periods. So I would think that spanning too broad a set of periods would cause you to possibly get multiple different workloads in there and maybe have it recommend a lot more objects than might be necessary for a given, it's like I said, maybe a daytime where people are running analytics, then maybe at night, a batch, maybe at the week or month-end processing type of workload. So from that standpoint, I think you probably want to be in your being more judicious with smaller periods as opposed to a really like a 30-day type period if you keep AWR reports that long. But I think everybody's mileage will vary on that. So.
No, that's a good point. If I'm trying to just tune one aspect of my workload, then I should really just focus on that time period within the history that I've got.
Which a good point is sometimes we as administrators don't fully understand. So it may be involved going and asking the business folks, what are the specific problem areas and that we're trying to tackle, and what time periods does that occur in? So I think it varies, but no, it's a good point because AWR data can get fairly large. So and folks that are keeping it, I think 7 days is too short. I've always felt that it should at least cover a full, like a month-end business period. So 30 days, 45 days, in order to get a bigger picture, especially from a capacity standpoint. But anyways, I diverge in the conversation there. So, but it does give you the ability to to create a task, and then here you can specify what you want, or you can take a default, which is I think based on date and time, and then DBID. So again, you could move the data somewhere else from an AWR report, and because you can have different DBIDs, that you can actually have an AWR repository with lots of different database information for different the AWR information for different databases. So, and then it will give you the ability to say, how big is the column store you want me to estimate based on, and it will give a whatever you give, and I only have a fairly small amount, so I said 2 gigs, but it won't. It'll give you a high and a low of that. It won't just give one. It'll kind of give you a range. So if you say 2 gigs, it's going to go above and below that to give you a range of what it thinks is optimal. And then and back to our conversation about time, you can specify time frames. And so you can take the default, which is the current hour, the snapshot prior to the time you're running it, so you get a full, or you can specify a time periods that you want, which just translates into AWR snapshots. So you're looking for the begin and end snapshot period. So you can customize that however you want, run this multiple times, probably not going to just be able to run it once, to kind of get an idea of the activity that's going on and what the InMemory Advisor code, what the heuristics that are being applied, thinks about the analytic workload during your time period. And then you just run it. And of course, my case, it ran pretty fast. Oh, actually, I should mention, there are other options. You can, I just chose to consider all objects. You can maybe you would look at just, in our case, SSB schema. Maybe you have just a payable schema, or maybe a CRM schema, or maybe you just want to look at all the objects and see overall in the database what objects are possible for analytics. Now, it's not going to use SysOx. It's not going to use the data dictionary objects. It's going to exclude those. We don't support those for database and memory, but it's going to look at application schemas. And what else? Does its thing, and then it creates an InMemory Advisor report, an HTML report, which is what I showed you down below here, and then a SQL statement, which basically will give you all of the alter table statements, so you can just run the SQL statement if you want. Maybe you want to edit it and tailor it, but rather than having to type it all out, which is kind of nice. So since it's already doing the work, why not take advantage of it? And then when I ran this, since I don't have any analytic workload in this particular environment, I'm going to flip back, and if we have questions, I come back to it, but I'm going to flip back to my presentation where I do have some information that I carved out of a InMemory Advisor report, and that won't show anybody's actual data. And what you're going to get is initially a section that says, well, based on that time period, how much analytic processing actually occurred. And in this case, 88%, which was really high. Anything probably above 20, 30% is worth looking at. Even below that, it may be worth looking at, but it's not going to be as valuable as if you have significant, what I would say significant. What's significant for you may not be significant for somebody else. So again, this one's one where you have to kind of apply your, so often when I do calls and conferences, people say, well, what's the cookbook? How much memory do I need? What objects should I put in the column store? Just tell me what I need to do and I'll do it. And unfortunately, it's like a lot of DBA tasks, it depends. And so it depends on your workload, your requirements. So anyways, the bottom line here is that based on the total database time, it'll carve out what it thinks is the analytic processing and give you a percentage, kind of a rough guesstimate. Is this worth looking at? Maybe, maybe not. 88% probably is. When you start to get down into, is it 10%? Is it 20%? Where that line is drawn, it's hard to say, depends on your workload. The next portion will give you an estimate on how much memory and how much benefit based on that memory size. And so that's the next section in that report. And so like I said, 2 gigabytes when I ran it. So it'll basically go 2 gigabytes and it'll go above and below that. And we'll try to give a guesstimate of, if you were to give even more space than the 2 gigabytes, you'd get more benefit, or maybe not any more benefit. And it's very similar to the advisors you see in some of the other AWR reports for, say, like the buffer cache. If you increased your buffer cache, it says that you get even more object hits, if you will, or you'd reduce your I/O requirements because more of those database blocks would be in memory. So same kind of idea, kind of giving you a range of what it thinks might be useful for an in-memory column store size. And then in the next 2 sections, what it'll do is, and I know it's a little bit hard to see, so let me flip into, see if that makes it a little bit better, maybe not. But and then this is all listed in the best practices in the white papers as well. So you can go back and say, oh yeah, okay, that's what he meant. But it'll list SQL statements and which SQL statements and how much benefit it found that you might get from the column store. And then it will also list the objects that are being accessed by those SQL statements and say, these objects are of this size, and we think based on compression, you'll only have to have this much memory used for those objects. And then it'll give you a SQL statements to actually implement those recommendations if you decide to, or maybe you tailor them. Let me preface all of this, though, with the fact that, so this is all using AWR and ASH data. It's not able to actually run the queries with database in memory. So that would require you actually allocating memory, being on the right version, having the license. So it's never going to be perfect. It isn't. We're going to apply heuristics, things like how much data is being accessed, how it's being accessed within SQL statements. So it's always going to be a guesstimate, if you will, a best guess. I mean, it's a great starting point, but it's never going to be perfect. You're unlikely. Maybe you get a win, but it's unlikely that this is going to be your first cut and you're going to know everything you need for sizing and objects to place in and SQL, and it's going to be a complete happy path. You're probably going to have to do a little more work than just running the InMemory Advisor report. But it's a great place to start, and it also is a great place to decide, could I take advantage of that in database and memory for the workload that I'm looking at? And so that's kind of my caveat to all of this, which is reasonable if you think about it, but sometimes people forget and they just assume, again, a cookbook, I can just do this and everything will be perfect. All right, so I think I've covered most of what I wanted to cover with that. I also will just point out our blog and resources page, where all of this is also, we have right down in this section here, InMemory Advisor link. If you don't remember the URL, if you don't remember, I need the Google InMemory Advisor, you can actually just go click on that. And then our URL is up here. Wow, I just kind of ripped through all that, Maria, but anything else to add to that?
No, you did great. There were a couple of questions through Q&A. I have sent some answers back, but just to do a recap to finish off and perhaps give other folks a chance to think about what they've heard and see if they've got any follow-up questions. But number one, do I need the database object statistics as well, or AWR? So they were asking, do I also need to extract the stats? So,
did you answer that already?
I did in the chat, but check if I'm right for what I said.
Yeah, no, it's just going to use, my understanding is just uses AWR and ASH. So that's why you can extract that information somewhere else, because we don't have to then look at any of the other data dictionary information. Entries. That would be more of an optimizer thing. So
exactly, yeah, that's what I said. Okay, phew. All right, I got that one right. The other question was, given the fact that this is focused towards analytics, could I expect to see performance improvements if I was doing Oracle machine learning? So if I was taking advantage of the machine learning inside of the Oracle database, would this help?
Did you answer that one? That one's a little tougher.
I'll tell you what I said. I don't know and whether you want to add to it or not. Although it doesn't do anything specific for machine learning, part of building a model and deploying a model is scanning and filtering large volumes of data to check. And so the underlying queries in machine learning could benefit from InMemory, but there's nothing specific about InMemory with machine learning. But really any reporting workload would benefit from InMemory.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's why I always tell folks, if you have, if your queries, and this is what the InMemory Advisor ultimately is doing, it says that if your query or queries are spending a significant amount of time scanning, filtering, aggregating data, joining data or doing group by aggregation. So the difference being functional type aggregations like mins, maxes, averages versus group by aggregation. Then database in-memory is going to help. That's what in-memory advisor is going to look at. If you're doing that with machine learning, which you probably are because you think about it, it's trying to look at patterns or trends, then maybe it takes advantage of it, maybe it doesn't. It depends, I guess, on what algorithms you're applying and how you're doing that. I don't pretend to be a machine learning expert. I'm still trying to catch up with all that as well. But so I think the test would be if it falls into any of those three categories of really accessing data, then it might actually help. So I think you did, yeah, well, obviously you're as good at answering these questions as I am. So, yeah.
But so that's it right now on the Q&A. For me, I guess what I would say is trial and error too, is that it's worth running the advisor, as you mentioned, maybe a couple of times over different periods to try and really get a good sense of what recommendations you should do. And then just try it out and see whether or not it's benefiting you.
Right. Yeah. And it's like a lot of things with Oracle database. Everybody runs their business differently. So that's why it's very hard for us to say you can just do X, Y, and Z and everything will be happy path. And so, and that's really think of it as an iterative approach, I think is the best way to look at this. And not just an iterative approach, but also, is this worth even investigating? If I only have OLTP workload, then it's probably not worth looking at database in-memory, because remember, we're focused on analytics. Mixed workload, data warehouse, reporting, BI, those kinds of workloads, this is probably going to really help.
All right, I've got one more from you. I've read that ADW, so I believe that's the Autonomous Data Warehouse, does not support database in-memory. Is that correct? And if so, why?
So Autonomous Data Warehouse does support database in-memory under the covers for Flash, on Exadata Flash. So one of the things we introduced in 12.2, but in 18C really turned loose database in-memory formats for Exadata Flash was supporting all objects, not just HCC type objects. But what we'll do is any object, and so in ADW, we don't support currently database in-memory in DRAM, but so that's in the SGA, the in-memory column store. So this here, but we do support it in the flash cache. So we'll smart scan data, we'll actually bring it into the flash cache, reformat it into database in-memory formats, be able to use SIMD vector processing and all sorts of other of our techniques for database in memory, assuming, of course, that you have the in-memory underscore size parameter. Actually, I'm sorry, ADW, it's already said. So in ADW, this even works non-ADW Exadata, we have an advantage of being able to essentially tier the storage. So, but in ADW specifically, we will automatically use the Flash for database in memory formatted columnar data to give you additional speed up on the second time you hit that data. And so it is supported. And the other advantage is you get some of the other optimizer features. And correct me if since I don't get to play with ADW very often because, but you actually also get vector group by and those are Bloom filters, right?
Correct. Yeah, you'll get all the benefits of database in memory and in a bigger area because there's a lot more flash on an Exadata than there is DRAM. So in fact, the volume of data that could benefit from the in-memory format is actually potentially larger in ADW than what you might be able to get into DRAM. Yeah, and as you said, it's going to automatically determine what goes in based on your data access. So it's somewhat automagic, I guess would be the way to describe it, that you don't have to worry as much about what goes in. We'll take care of it based on your data access. Right, and that's why it fits in with the Autonomous Data Warehouse because you don't do an alter table command. You don't have to do anything. We'll automatically manage that. And that's actually true for
Exadata with InMemory in general, because again, as you mentioned, we typically Exadata, or not typically, Exadata systems have terabytes of flash,
Right.
whereas that you're limited to how much DRAM you can actually have on a compute node. But in storage servers, there's terabytes of flash. So all of a sudden, your columnar footprint got much, much larger. So yeah, so we do support database in memory on ADW, but probably what you're hearing is the fact that we don't support it in the DRAM portion of it. We only support it on flash, which maybe is probably where the confusion is. And we have some blog posts about that and some links to Roger McNichol's blog as well about how all of that works. So there is some, if you want to go search on the blog, there's some, I think that we've done 3 posts and Roger's done several. And I have a link to his website along with SQL Maria and the resources page. A little plug there for you. But yeah,
well, what I'll do is in the Q&A, I'll add links to both of those to the answer so that they've got that. One last one in the Q&A for you. Do we still need the compression advisor with the InMemory? Now that we have the InMemory advisor, is there still benefit to run, I guess, the compression advisor?
And there is. So the compression advisor starting in 12.102, so think 11.2 type databases, even though there's a compression advisor, it doesn't understand database in memory compression. So the in-memory advisor is going to guesstimate the amount of compression that it can do. Let's see if I have it in here. Well, you can't read it, so I apologize for that being so hard to see. Let's see if I can make this bigger though, although it still might not be all that readable. But it's going to estimate the compression, the amount of compression that those objects will get. But it's not going to be perfect because it doesn't actually do the compression. Whereas the compression advisor, 12.102 and above, actually you can actually plug in the mem compress for query low, query high, capacity low, capacity high, and get a very accurate picture of how much space that object is going to take. So what I would suggest is, again, you're using the in-memory advisor as your first cut. Once you've identified objects that you actually are going to try with database in memory, then you run those objects through the compression advisor, and that'll give you a pretty good picture of how much column store you'll really need. And you can use those tools together. Any other questions?
That's it right now. I've gone ahead and added the link to the blog. So hopefully the folks will be able to take advantage of that. And then other than that, I think we are good right now. Unless folks have anything else they'd like to ask.
We'll give them a minute or so, and then if nothing, then we'll go ahead and sign off.
Well, if there isn't anything else, we will make this recording available. That's the last question I've just got asked. When is this going to get posted? So can you give us some information about where they can go to find office hours, historic office hours?
Yeah, basically just hopefully I didn't close it. I don't think maybe I, oh no, I was in this page here. Yeah, right on the, right on the office hours page. If you go scroll down, the one that you connected to, we have there all of our previous office hours sessions. And so if you give us probably a couple of days, maybe 2 days, maybe, I don't know if I'll get to it today. I have to go do another conference session this afternoon, but you'll be able to click on and watch the recording. And here's our previous recordings of our other office hours sessions if you want to go through those. But yeah, just basically hitting the Ask Tom session or the webpage that you did to connect to this session, you can actually go click on the recording. So it'll be there again in the next couple. I mean, we're usually pretty good about getting out in like just a couple of days. So it will be recorded and available there.
All right, perfect. I have added that to the chat too, so that folks know where to go. And then other than that, I think you're off the hook, sir. Well, thanks so much for a great session.
Thank you for for helping out. I really appreciate it. And with that, I guess we'll go ahead and sign off.
All right. Thanks so much for joining, folks. Hopefully we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.